The alien warship Sovereign's Wrath cut through the void like a predator stalking its prey. Its hull, forged from the rare metals of distant worlds, gleamed with an otherworldly sheen that spoke of technology far beyond human comprehension. Within its corridors, the Zephyrian crew moved with the calculated precision of a species that had conquered 17 star systems in the past century alone. Commander Vexthera stood before the massive viewing portal of the bridge, her arms crossed in satisfaction as she gazed upon the small human transport vessel trapped in their tractor beam. The ship was nothing more than a metal coffin drifting helplessly in space, its engines disabled by their superior weaponry. To the Zephyrians, humans were little more than an amusing curiosity, a primitive species that had barely managed to stumble beyond their own solar system. "Status report," Vexthara commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never known defeat. Her translator implant converted her words into the standard galactic language, though she doubted the humans would understand even that much. Sub-Commander Kraildex approached with the fluid grace typical of his species. His exoskeleton gleamed under the ship's bioluminescent lighting as he consulted his data tablet. "The human vessel has been completely disabled, Commander. Our scans indicate minimal crew aboard, perhaps 3 individuals at most. Their technology is laughably primitive." Vexthara allowed herself a moment of amusement. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for over 3,000 years, subjugating species after species. Humans, from what little intelligence they had gathered, were newcomers to space travel. They possessed no significant military might, no advanced weapons, and certainly no understanding of real warfare. "Bring them aboard," she ordered. "I'm curious to see what these creatures look like up close. Perhaps they'll provide some entertainment before we decide their fate." The tractor beam pulled the human vessel into the docking bay with mechanical precision. Zephyrian soldiers, each standing nearly 8 feet tall and armed with plasma rifles, surrounded the airlock as the captured ship was secured. Their armor was a work of art and engineering, lightweight, yet capable of deflecting most known weapons in the galaxy. Against primitive humans, it was absolute overkill. As the airlock hissed open, 3 figures emerged from the transport vessel. 2 were clearly civilians, a middle-aged man in what appeared to be a merchant's attire, and a younger woman whose hands shook with barely contained terror. But it was the 3rd figure that caught everyone's attention. He was tall for a human, perhaps 6 feet in height, with broad shoulders and a bearing that spoke of military training. His dark hair was cut short, and his eyes cold, calculating. Blue eyes swept the docking bay with the methodical precision of someone assessing threats and opportunities. Unlike his companions, he showed no fear, no panic. If anything, he seemed almost bored. The soldiers gestured with their weapons for the humans to move forward. The 2 civilians complied immediately, stumbling in their haste to obey. But the 3rd man, the soldier, walked with measured steps, his posture relaxed yet somehow dangerous. Even unarmed and outnumbered, he carried himself like a predator among sheep. "Strip them for weapons," ordered Captain Zolkar, the docking bay's security chief. "Though I doubt these primitives possess anything that could threaten us." The search was thorough but revealed nothing beyond basic personal effects. The soldier submitted to the procedure without resistance, though his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging every detail of his surroundings. When it was complete, he stood quietly with his hands at his sides, waiting. "What is your designation?" "Human?" Captain Zolkar demanded, his translator converting the words into broken English. The man's response was calm, professional. "Marcus Thompson, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy." The Zephyrians exchanged glances. They had little knowledge of human military structure, but the man's bearing suggested he was more than a simple soldier. There was something about him, a stillness, that reminded Zolkar uncomfortably of apex predators from his homeworld. "Navy," Kraildex mused as he reviewed the translation. "Primitive water-based warfare, I assume. How quaint that they still use such ancient methods." The human called Thompson didn't react to the mockery. He simply stood there, observing, learning. It was behavior that should have been submissive, but somehow felt anything but. The three prisoners were escorted through the ship's corridors toward the detention level. The Sovereign's wrath was a testament to Zephyrian engineering, its walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that served both as lighting and as a complex communication network. The corridors were wide enough to accommodate the large frames of the ship's crew, and every surface was crafted from materials that could withstand the rigors of deep space travel. As they walked, Thompson continued his assessment. He noted the position of security cameras, the locations of access panels, the rhythm of the guard patrols they passed. To any observer, he appeared to be simply moving from point A to point B. In reality, he was building a three-dimensional map of the ship in his mind. The detention center consisted of 3 cells arranged around a circular monitoring station. Each cell was a cube of transparent aluminum approximately 8 feet on. Each side furnished with a simple sleeping platform and basic amenities. The technology was impressive. The walls were apparently solid to the touch, but became transparent from the outside at the guard's discretion. The 2 civilians were placed in the first 2 cells, where they immediately began what appeared to be prayers in their native languages. Thompson was secured in the 3rd cell, where he took a moment to examine his surroundings before settling onto the sleeping platform with his back against the wall. "Post a guard rotation," Captain Zolkar instructed the detention officer. 2 guards at all times. These creatures may be primitive, but caution costs nothing. Understood, Captain? Though I hardly think such measures are necessary for these specimens. Thompson had closed his eyes and appeared to be resting, but both Zephyrians felt an inexplicable urge to ensure their weapons were fully charged before leaving. Hours passed in relative quiet. The 2 civilian prisoners had eventually exhausted themselves with their fears and fallen into fitful sleep. Thompson, however, remained alert despite his relaxed posture. He had spent worse nights in worse places, and his training had taught him to find rest wherever possible while maintaining awareness of his surroundings. The ship operated on a 26-hour cycle, and Thompson used the time to study the guard rotations. The Zephyrians were professional but predictable. They changed posts every 4 hours, always following the same routes, always checking the same systems in the same order. It was military precision, but it was also routine, and routine could be exploited. When the ship's day cycle began, Commander Vextara arrived to inspect her prizes. She studied the 3 humans with the detached interest of a scientist examining specimens. The 2 civilians pressed themselves against the far walls of their cells, but Thompson rose smoothly to his feet and met her gaze directly. "Interesting," she murmured to her aide. "This one shows no deference. Does he not understand his situation?" "Perhaps. He lacks the intelligence to comprehend it, Commander." Vexthara activated the cell's communication system. "Human soldier, I am Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Empire. You and your companions are now prisoners of war, though I use that term loosely since your species hardly qualifies as capable of real warfare." Thompson's response was delivered in the same calm tone he had used before. "I understand, ma'am. What are your intentions regarding my companions?" The question surprised her. Not its content, but the way it was asked, without pleading, without anger, simply a request for information. It was how she might ask about weather conditions or supply status. They will be evaluated for usefulness. If they possess valuable knowledge about your species or your territories, they may be permitted to live as servants. If not, she let the implication hang in the air. "I see," Thompson nodded once. "And myself?" "You present a more interesting case. Your bearing suggests military training, which means you likely possess information about human defensive capabilities. Such knowledge would be valuable to the Empire." "I understand your position, ma'am." Vexthara found herself oddly disturbed by the human's calm acceptance. She had interrogated prisoners from dozens of species, and they all followed predictable patterns: fear, anger, bargaining, despair. This human showed none of those reactions. He simply accepted the information and processed it, as if he were receiving a briefing rather than a death sentence. "You will be questioned extensively," she continued. "The process will be unpleasant. Your cooperation would be appreciated, though it is not strictly necessary for us to extract what we need. Understood. Have you nothing more to say? No pleas for mercy? No declarations of defiance? Thompson appeared to consider this seriously. Would either make any difference to my situation? No. No, ma'am, I have nothing more to say at this time. Vexthara left the detention center with an uncomfortable feeling she couldn't quite identify. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Zephyrian Empire had developed efficient methods for breaking the will of captured enemies. Fear was usually sufficient, backed by demonstrations of superior technology and military might. This human showed no fear, and his lack of reaction to their power was somehow more unsettling than rage or terror would have been. The next several hours passed quietly. The ship's routine continued around them: crew changes, maintenance cycles, the constant hum of engines pushing them through hyperspace toward the nearest Zephyrian military outpost. Thompson used the time to continue his observations, noting patterns in the artificial gravity fluctuations that might indicate engine placement, counting the footsteps of different individuals to map the crew's size and distribution. It was during the third guard rotation that something unexpected occurred. The new guards were younger than their predecessors, recently graduated from the Imperial Military Academy, if their perfect posture and overeager attention to protocol were any indication. They discussed their duties in voices slightly too loud, their confidence slightly too forced. One of them, Guard Veltar, seemed particularly interested in studying the human prisoner. "I've heard these creatures are surprisingly durable for primitives," he said to his partner. "Perhaps we should test that claim." His partner, Guard Nexith, glanced nervously at the security cameras. "Standing orders are to keep them unharmed until the interrogation." Commander Vexthara was very specific. "A small test wouldn't be noticed. Besides, this one has an insolent bearing. Look at how he sits there, as if he owns the cell." Thompson appeared to be meditating, but he heard every word through the cell's communication system, which the guards had forgotten to deactivate. He didn't move, didn't react, simply continued the slow, steady breathing pattern he had maintained for the past hour. Veltar approached the cell controls. Just a minor adjustment to the gravity field. Let's see how well he maintains that composure when he's pressed against the floor like the inferior being he is. The gravity in Thompson's cell increased dramatically. Where, before he had experienced roughly standard Earth gravity, now he felt as if he weighed 3 times his normal mass. The sleeping platform creaked under the additional force, and the 2 civilian prisoners cried out from their cells as they experienced the same crushing pressure. Thompson's breathing never changed. He shifted slightly to accommodate the new conditions, but remained upright, his meditation unbroken. If anything, he seemed more relaxed than before, as if the additional weight was somehow comforting rather than oppressive. "Increase it more," Veltar demanded, frustrated by the lack of reaction. "This is unwise," Nexith protested. "If we damage him, we won't damage him. Just humble him. These creatures need to learn their place in the natural order." The gravity increased again. Now Thompson was experiencing nearly 4 times Earth normal, a crushing force that should have driven him to his knees. The 2 civilians were pressed flat against their cell floors, barely able to breathe. But Thompson remained seated, his posture unchanged, his breathing steady. For the first time since his capture, he spoke. His voice carried clearly despite the oppressive gravity, calm and professional as always. "You might want to be careful with that control, son. I don't think your commander would appreciate finding her prisoners injured due to equipment malfunction." Veltar's 4 hands clenched into fists. The human's casual tone, the way he spoke as if offering helpful advice rather than cowering before, superior power ignited something dangerous in the young guard's mind. "You dare to threaten me, primitive? I hold your miserable life in my hands." "No threat," Thompson replied mildly. "Just an observation. In my experience, officers don't react well when subordinates exceed their authority." The words were delivered without heat, without challenge, but they found their mark. Veltar realized that despite his control over the gravity field, despite his superior technology and physical advantages, he was the one who felt threatened. Something about this human's absolute calm in the face of overwhelming force was deeply, fundamentally wrong. Perhaps we should return the gravity to normal settings, Nexus suggested urgently. The shift change approaches, and if Senior Guard Kexanoth discovers— Silence! Veltar snapped, but his partner's words carried weight. Senior Guard Kexanoth was a veteran of 12 campaigns and had little patience for undisciplined behavior from junior personnel. With obvious reluctance, Veltar returned the gravity to normal settings. The two civilians gasped with relief, but Thompson simply nodded once, a small gesture of acknowledgement that somehow felt more intimidating than any threat could have been. "Thank you," he said quietly. As the next shift arrived, Veltar filed his report with no mention of the gravity incident, but he found himself checking the cell's security feeds throughout his off-duty hours, unable to shake the memory of those calm blue eyes watching him with what had felt uncomfortably like pity. The ship continued its journey toward the Zephyrian military outpost, its crew unaware that their most dangerous prisoner had just completed his preliminary assessment of their capabilities and found them wanting. In his cell, Thompson continued his patient observation, building plans within plans, waiting for the right moment to remind the galaxy why humans had earned their reputation among the few species that had encountered them in battle. The name Reaper had not yet been spoken aboard the Sovereign's Wrath, but it would be soon. And when it was, the Zephyrians would learn that some prey had teeth far sharper than their predators could imagine. The interrogation chamber aboard the Sovereign's Wrath was designed to break minds. Located 3 levels below the detention center, it existed in perpetual twilight, lit only by the pulsing bioluminescent patterns that served as both illumination and psychological warfare. The walls themselves seemed alive, shifting between colors that had no names in human language, creating an environment that was meant to disorient and intimidate. "Commander." Vexthara reviewed the prisoner files one final time as her interrogation team made their preparations. The 2 civilian humans had already been processed. The merchant possessed useful information about human trade routes, while the woman appeared to be merely a passenger with no strategic value. Both had broken within hours of enhanced questioning, providing everything the Zephyrians needed to know about human commerce and basic territorial claims. The soldier, however, remained an enigma. "Marcus Thompson," she read aloud, though the name felt awkward on her tongue. Human naming conventions were primitive compared to the complex genealogical identifiers used by Zephyrian society. Chief Petty Officer. 23 years of military service. Special operations background. Interrogator Prime Zalduin approached with the flowing movements characteristic of his subspecies. His cranial tendrils writhed slowly as he processed the information, and his pale eyes held the cold patience of someone who had extracted secrets from the minds of hundreds of beings across dozens of species. "The neural interface has been calibrated for human brain structure," he reported. "Though primitive by our standards, their minds show interesting complexity in certain areas. This one's psychological profile suggests unusual resistance to standard techniques." Vexthara studied the security feed showing Thompson in his cell. He sat in the same position he had maintained for the past 6 hours, back straight, hands resting on his knees, eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation. His breathing remained steady and controlled, showing none of the anticipatory stress that typically preceded interrogation. "What is your assessment of his mental state?" she asked. Zalduin's tendrils pulsed in what passed for a shrug among his kind. "Calm, unusually so. Most species show elevated stress indicators when facing the unknown, but this human's vital signs remain within normal parameters. It's as if he's preparing for something familiar rather than something to be feared. Perhaps he lacks the intelligence to understand his situation." "No, Commander." His questions during detention intake were too precise, his observations too calculated. He understands perfectly. That makes his composure all the more interesting. The chamber's preparation was completed with mechanical precision. The neural interface chair was adjusted for human physiology, its restraints positioned to accommodate the prisoner's frame. Sensory manipulation equipment hummed quietly in the background, ready to assault sight, sound, and even smell with carefully calibrated stimuli designed to overwhelm cognitive defenses. "Bring him," Vexthara ordered. The escort consisted of 4 guards in full battle armor, armed with plasma rifles and neural disruptors. It was overkill for a single unarmed human, but Zephyrian military doctrine emphasized overwhelming superiority in all situations. Thompson walked between them with the same measured pace he had maintained since capture, his eyes taking in every detail of the corridor's layout. As they descended toward the interrogation level, Guard Veltar, who had requested assignment to the escort, couldn't resist a comment. "Not so confident now, are you, Primitive?" "Wait until you experience real Zephyrian technology." Thompson glanced at him briefly. "I'm sure it will be educational." The simple response, delivered without sarcasm or bravado, somehow made Veltar feel foolish for having spoken. There was something about the human's tone that suggested he was genuinely looking forward to the experience. As if it were a learning opportunity rather than torture, the interrogation chamber's doors sealed with a sound like a tomb closing. Thompson was secured in the neural interface chair, the restraints clicking into place around his wrists and ankles. The chair's sensors immediately began reading his vital signs, projecting the data onto screens visible to the interrogation team. "Marcus Thompson," Commander Vexthara began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics. "You are now subject to enhanced interrogation under the authority of the Zephyrian Empire. Your cooperation will determine the extent of your suffering." Thompson's heart rate remained steady at 68 beats per minute. His breathing was deep and controlled. The neural sensors detected no spike in adrenaline, no elevation in stress hormones. If anything, his vital signs suggested someone settling in for a restful nap. "I understand," he replied calmly. Interrogator Prime Zalduin activated the chamber's first level of sensory manipulation. The lighting shifted to frequencies designed to trigger disorientation in most species, while subsonic vibrations thrummed through the chair at wavelengths calculated to induce anxiety and paranoia. Thompson blinked once as the lighting changed, then closed his eyes and continued breathing steadily. His vital signs showed no change whatsoever. "Interesting," Zalduin murmured. "His nervous system appears to be adapting to the stimuli rather than being overwhelmed by it." "Increase the intensity," Vexthara commanded. The sensory assault escalated. Colors that had no business existing in nature strobed across the chamber walls. Sound frequencies shifted rapidly from barely audible whispers to bone-deep vibrations that should have been physically painful. Chemical dispensers released airborne compounds, designed to trigger fear responses at the neurological level. Thompson's breathing deepened slightly, not with stress, but as if he were actively working to process and adapt to the new conditions. His heart rate actually decreased to 65 beats per minute. "Remarkable," Zalduin observed. "He's using breathing techniques to regulate his nervous system's response. I've seen similar methods among warrior monks from the Centauri system, but this level of control in a supposedly primitive species." Vexthara felt the first stirrings of genuine curiosity. "Begin the questioning. Let's see how long his composure lasts when we add psychological pressure to the physical stimuli." "State your full military designation and unit assignment," Zalduin commanded, his voice now carrying the harmonic undertones that most species found impossible to resist. "Marcus Thompson, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, Naval Special Warfare Development Group." The information was provided promptly and without hesitation, but Zalduin frowned at his readings. The human's vital signs suggested he was telling the truth, but there was something else, an underlying tension that hadn't been present before. "Explain the structure of human naval forces." "The United States Navy is organized into numbered fleets, each responsible for specific operational areas. Fleet composition varies based on mission requirements and includes surface vessels, submarines, aircraft, and specialized units." Again, the response seemed truthful, but the underlying tension remained. It was as if Thompson was carefully measuring each answer, providing accurate information while withholding something significant. "Describe human defensive capabilities." For the first time since the interrogation began, Thompson paused. The silence stretched for several seconds before he replied. Human military doctrine emphasizes mobility, technology integration, and asymmetric warfare principles. Specific capabilities are classified above my clearance level. The neural sensors detected a slight elevation in stress indicators, but not in the pattern typical of deception. Instead, it read like someone accessing genuinely painful memories. Vexthara leaned forward in her observation position. He's withholding something. Apply additional pressure. Zalduin increased the neural interface's penetration depth. The device was designed to read surface thoughts and emotional states, but at higher settings it could probe deeper into memory and psychological structure. For most species, this level of intrusion was agonizing. Thompson's jaw tightened slightly, the first visible sign of discomfort he had shown. But instead of breaking down or crying out, he began to speak in a voice that was barely above a whisper. My unit designation was officially classified. We didn't exist in any public records. No families were notified when we didn't come home. No flags were folded for our funerals. The words carried a weight that the translation system couldn't fully convey, but the emotion behind them registered clearly on the neural sensors: grief, loss, and underneath it all, a cold fury that had been carefully contained and controlled but never eliminated. Continue, Zalduin pressed, sensing that he had found a crack in the human psychological armor. We operated in places that didn't officially exist, against enemies whose existence was denied by our own governments. We did things. Thompson's voice trailed off, and for a moment his careful control slipped. The neural sensors spiked with readings that made Zalduin step back from his console. The emotions pouring from Thompson's mind weren't fear or pain. They were darker, deeper things. Memories of violence so extreme that they had carved permanent channels in his psyche. Images of conflict that had left scars on his soul that would never heal, and threaded through it all was a name, repeated like a mantra, like a prayer, like a curse. Reaper, 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 what is Reaper? Zalduin demanded, his harmonic voice now carrying notes of genuine concern. Thompson's eyes opened for the first time since the interrogation began. In the shifting alien light of the chamber, they seemed to glow with an inner fire that had nothing to do with technology and everything to do with experiences that had burned away. Everything human except the will to continue fighting. Reaper was what they called me, he said quietly. In the places where governments fear to send their armies, where conventional warfare fails and only one kind of soldier can succeed. They called me Reaper because I was the last thing enemies saw before they stopped being problems. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Guard Veltar, monitoring from his position by the door, found himself checking the charge level on his plasma rifle without consciously deciding to do so. Vexthara activated her private communication channel to Zalduin. Is he fabricating this? Some form of psychological warfare? The interrogator's tendrils writhed nervously as he consulted his instruments. No, Commander. The neural patterns indicate these are genuine memories. But the psychological profile? I've never seen anything like it. The level of controlled violence, the systematic conditioning, ... What kind of warriors do these humans create? Thompson continued speaking, his voice carrying the flat, factual tone of someone delivering a mission briefing. 73 confirmed eliminations across 4 continents. 0 mission failures. 0 compromises of operational security. 0 survivors among hostile forces who encountered me directly. He paused, and when he spoke again, there was something almost like regret in his voice. The name followed me. Other operators heard the stories, saw the results. Command started using Reaper as a psychological weapon. Just the rumor that I might be in an area would cause enemy forces to abandon their positions. Zalduin tried to probe deeper, to access more detailed memories, but he encountered something unexpected. Instead of the chaotic jumble typical of traumatized minds, Thompson's memories were organized with military precision, compartmentalized, categorized, and locked behind psychological barriers that had been reinforced through years of training and experience. How many of your kind possess similar capabilities? Vexthara demanded. Thompson's smile was thin and cold. More than you'd want to face in battle. Fewer than we'd prefer to have watching our backs. Explain human special operations structure. Each branch maintains specialized units. Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, Marine Raiders, Air Force Pararescue. We train together, operate together, die together. The public knows our names, but not our missions. Our enemies know our missions, but wish they'd never learned our names. The neural sensors were now registering something that made Zalduin deeply uncomfortable. As Thompson spoke about his fellow warriors, his vital signs showed genuine affection, the deep, unbreakable bonds forged between soldiers who had faced death together. But underlying that affection was something else, a protective instinct so fierce it bordered on the primal. "If my teammates were captured," Thompson said softly, "they would come for me. They would tear through your entire fleet with their bare hands if necessary. They would never stop, never give up, never accept that I was gone." "Your companions in the transport vessel showed no such dedication," Veltar interjected from his position by the door. Thompson's gaze shifted to the guard, and Veltar immediately regretted drawing attention to himself. Those blue eyes held depths of violence that made the young Zephyrian's exoskeleton feel suddenly fragile. "Those weren't my teammates," Thompson said simply. "Those were innocent civilians who had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The people I served with are still out there, still fighting, still protecting humanity from threats it doesn't even know exist." Vexthara felt a growing unease. The interrogation was proceeding according to protocol, but instead of breaking down the prisoner's resistance, it seemed to be revealing something far more dangerous than they had expected. This human wasn't just a soldier, he was a weapon, carefully crafted and precisely aimed by a species that apparently understood warfare at levels the Zephyrian Empire hadn't even considered. "What were your last operational orders?" Zalduin pressed. Thompson was quiet for a long moment, and the neural sensors detected a spike in emotional activity. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to press against the chamber walls. "Reconnaissance. Intelligence gathering on reported extraterrestrial contact. The transport vessel was cover a routine civilian cargo run that would attract no attention. My mission was to observe, assess, and report back on any non-human technology or capabilities." The implications of this statement hit the interrogation team like a physical blow. This human hadn't been captured by accident. He had been specifically deployed to gather intelligence on alien species, which meant humanity already knew about the existence of other intelligent life, and they were preparing for contact. "How long has your species been aware of extraterrestrial life?" Vexthara demanded. "Long enough to prepare for this conversation." The calm certainty in Thompson's voice sent chills through everyone in the chamber. He wasn't speaking as a defeated prisoner providing information under duress. He was speaking as a professional soldier completing his mission even while in enemy custody. Zalduin increased the neural interface to maximum penetration, desperate to access the deeper layers of the human's knowledge. But instead of breaking through Thompson's psychological barriers, the device encountered something that made the interrogator stumble backward from his controls. In the deepest recesses of Thompson's mind, carefully hidden behind layers of training and conditioning, was a countdown. Not to rescue, not to escape, but to something else entirely. Something that had been activated the moment his transport vessel had been captured, something that was now approaching zero with mathematical precision. "Commander," Zalduin gasped, his voice tight with sudden fear. "We need to terminate this interrogation immediately." There's something in his mind, a protocol of some kind. It's not a memory, it's active. But before Vexthara could respond, Thompson spoke again, his voice now carrying a tone of professional satisfaction. "Mission parameters have been fully satisfied. Intelligence on alien technology, capabilities, and psychological profiles has been gathered and evaluated. Transmission of findings to command authority is no longer required." His smile was the expression of a predator who had been patient, careful, and thorough in his hunting. "Thank you for your cooperation in this intelligence-gathering operation. The information you've provided will be invaluable in preparing humanity's response to first contact scenarios." In the sudden silence that followed, The only sound in the chamber was the steady beeping of the neural interface as it registered Thompson's vital signs returning to the calm, controlled patterns they had maintained throughout his captivity. He had just revealed that everything, his capture, his interrogation, his apparent cooperation, had been part of a larger operation. And somewhere in the depths of space, his transmission was already racing toward Earth at faster-than-light speeds, carrying everything he had learned about Zephyrian technology and psychology to the very people the Empire had dismissed as primitives. The hunters had become the hunted, and they were only just beginning to realize it. The silence in the interrogation chamber stretched like a held breath. Commander Vexthara stared at the human prisoner, her four hands clenched as the implications of his words sank into her consciousness like poison. Around her, the interrogation team stood frozen, their confidence shattered by a revelation that turned everything they thought they knew about this situation inside out. "Impossible," Interrogator Prime Zalduin whispered, his cranial tendrils writhing in agitation. "Our sensors detected no transmission devices. The neural interface would have revealed any hidden technology." Thompson remained relaxed in the restraint chair, his expression holding the patient satisfaction of someone who had just completed a complex puzzle. "Your sensors are very impressive," he said conversationally. "Far more sophisticated than our intelligence estimates suggested. That information alone makes this mission worthwhile." Vexthara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What transmission?" "Our monitoring systems show no outgoing signals from this vessel, because there was no external transmission." Thompson's smile held no warmth. "Only the clinical efficiency of a professional explaining his craft. The data was encoded in quantum fluctuations within my own neural patterns. When your neural interface probed my mind, it automatically transmitted those patterns to your ship's main computer core for analysis." The color drained from Zalduin's exoskeleton. That's not possible. The interface is a read-only system. For most species, yes. But human neural architecture includes what you might call quantum processing, capabilities a byproduct of our evolution in a high-radiation environment. Under the right conditions, our brain patterns can create quantum entanglement effects with nearby electronics. Thompson's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing weather patterns. "Every probe of my memories created micro-entanglements with your computer systems. Those entanglements carried encoded data about everything I observed during my time aboard your ship. Ship layout, crew positions, technological capabilities, psychological profiles." Vexthara activated her emergency communication channel. "Security. Initiate immediate data quarantine protocols. All computer systems are to be isolated pending full analysis." But even as she gave the orders, she realized the futility of them. If the human was telling the truth, the contamination had already occurred. Worse, it would be undetectable by conventional means woven into the quantum structure of their own technology. "Where is this data being transmitted to?" she demanded. Thompson's expression grew thoughtful, as if he were considering whether to answer. "Originally, a secure facility buried deep beneath the Colorado Rockies. But given the quantum nature of the entanglement, the information has probably been distributed across multiple sites by now." "Standard operational security?" He paused, his blue eyes focusing on something beyond the chamber walls. "By this time, three-dimensional models of your ship are being studied by our best engineers. Your weapons capabilities are being assessed by our tactical specialists. Your crew's psychological profiles are being analyzed by our intelligence experts." Guard Veltar stepped forward, his plasma rifle raised. "Commander, this creature is obviously fabricating these claims to create confusion. No primitive species possesses such technology." Thompson turned his attention to the young guard, and Veltar immediately regretted drawing that gaze. "Primitive," the human repeated softly. "You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Humans have been spacefaring for less than a century," Veltar protested, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Your technology is crude, your ship's barely capable of interplanetary travel." "True," Thompson nodded agreeably. But you're thinking in terms of conventional development patterns. Most species advance through predictable stages, discovering fire, developing agriculture, inventing tools, eventually reaching for the stars. Humans did things differently. The restraint chair's sensors continued their steady monitoring as Thompson spoke, confirming that his vital signs remained completely calm. Whatever stress or deception the Zephyrians expected to detect simply wasn't there. We developed warfare first, then adapted everything else to serve that purpose. While other species were learning to cooperate for mutual benefit, humans were learning to fight more effectively than anything that had ever existed. Every technological advancement, every scientific breakthrough, every step forward in our civilization, all of it filtered through one question: how can this help us kill our enemies more efficiently? Vexthara found herself taking an involuntary step backward. The human's words weren't delivered as threats or boasts, they were stated as simple facts. Observations about his species that he neither celebrated nor condemned. You speak of warfare as if it defines your entire civilization, she said. Because it does. Humans have been at war continuously for our entire recorded history. Not just wars between nations, but wars against nature, against disease, against death itself. We turned cooperation into a weapon, diplomacy into a weapon, even peace into a weapon. Thompson's smile was sharp as a blade. The only difference between a human civilian and a human soldier is the uniform. Zalduin studied his neural interface readings with growing alarm. The patterns emanating from Thompson's mind were unlike anything in his extensive database. Where most species showed clear distinctions between aggressive and passive mental states, the human's consciousness seemed to exist in a constant state of controlled lethality. "This is madness," the interrogator whispered. "A species cannot survive with such psychology. Internal conflict would destroy them before they could advance beyond primitive tribalism." "You'd think so," Thompson agreed. "But humans learned something that apparently escaped other species. The most dangerous enemy is the one who looks exactly like you. We perfected the art of killing our own kind first, then applied those lessons to everything else we encountered." He shifted slightly in the chair, and every armed guard in the chamber tensed, despite the impossibility of him escaping the restraints. "Do you know what humans call the period when we weren't actively fighting major wars?" "The Cold War. Even our peace is defined by conflict." Vexthara's communication implant chimed with an urgent message from the bridge. She activated it reluctantly, already dreading what she might hear. "Commander," came the voice of her navigation officer, "we're detecting anomalous quantum signatures throughout the ship's computer network. The patterns don't match any known technology, and they appear to be ... growing." Thompson's expression brightened with genuine interest. "Ah, the quantum entanglement is propagating through your network architecture. That's faster than our models predicted. Your computer systems are more interconnected than we thought." "What is happening to our ship?" Vexthara demanded. "Nothing harmful," Thompson assured her. "The quantum patterns are simply creating a real-time link between your systems and ours. Think of it as cultural exchange. Your technology teaches us about Zephyrian engineering principles, and our quantum signatures teach your computers about human problem-solving methodologies." The implications of this statement hit like a physical blow. If human quantum patterns were indeed integrating with Zephyrian computer systems, they weren't just stealing information, they were fundamentally altering how those systems operated. "This is an act of war," Vexthara said through clenched teeth. Thompson's expression grew genuinely puzzled. "War? No, Commander. This is reconnaissance. War is what happens after reconnaissance is complete." He leaned forward as much as the restraints would allow, his voice taking on the patient tone of someone explaining basic concepts to a child. "You captured a United States Navy intelligence operative conducting a lawful mission in neutral space. You subjected him to interrogation and torture. You threatened the lives of innocent civilians under his protection." Each statement was delivered with matter-of-fact precision, but the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop with every word. In human military doctrine, These actions constitute multiple violations of interstellar law. They justify proportional response under the principle of collective self-defense. Veltar's rifle wavered as he aimed it at Thompson's chest. Proportional response? You're one primitive human against an entire battle fleet. Thompson's laugh was genuinely amused. One human? Guard Veltar, you've been monitoring my communications this entire time, haven't you? Every word spoken in this chamber, every sensor reading, every tactical assessment, all of it has been transmitted through the quantum link to my command authority. The young Zephyrian's exoskeleton paled. He had indeed been recording everything as per standard interrogation protocols. But if Thompson was telling the truth, my superiors now possess complete real-time intelligence on your ship's capabilities. Crew psychology and operational procedures, Thompson continued conversationally. More importantly, they have detailed recordings of you, threatening civilian prisoners and subjecting a military captive to illegal interrogation. Vexthara felt the strategic situation, collapsing around her like a house built on sand. What do you want? Want? Thompson seemed genuinely surprised by the question. Commander, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It isn't. This is an intelligence briefing. I'm simply ensuring you understand the situation before the next phase begins. What next phase? Zalduin demanded, though his voice suggested he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. Thompson's smile returned, and this time it carried warmth, the affection of a professional discussing his craft with interested colleagues. Humans have a saying, no one fights alone. When you captured me, you didn't just take one prisoner. You issued a challenge to every special operations soldier in the human military. The chamber's lighting flickered as the ship's main computer cores struggled to process the quantum patterns spreading through their networks. In that brief moment of darkness, Thompson's voice carried with perfect clarity. They're coming for me, Commander. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Every SEAL, every Green Beret, every Marine Raider, every operator who's ever worn the flag, they consider my capture a personal insult. And humans take insults very, very personally. When the lights stabilized, Zephyrian saw something in Thompson's expression that made their evolutionary instincts scream warnings. It was the look of a predator who had finished playing with his food. How long? Vexthara asked quietly. The quantum transmission included our precise location and vector, Thompson replied. Human military response time for hostage rescue operations is typically measured in hours, not days. Of course, that's for Earth-based scenarios. Interstellar operations might take a little longer. He paused thoughtfully. Then again, humans have been preparing for first contact scenarios for decades. I suspect my people were already en route before you finished capturing my transport vessel. The ship's intercom crackled to life with an emergency announcement from the bridge. All hands to battle stations. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple incoming vessels of unknown configuration. Estimated time to intercept, 4 hours, 17 minutes. Thompson's vital signs remained perfectly stable as chaos erupted around him. Guards rushed to defensive positions. Officers screamed orders through communication channels, and the great warship that had seemed so powerful just hours before suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable. Impossible, Vexthara breathed. No fleet could have reached us this quickly. We're in deep space, light years from any human territory. Thompson's expression held infinite patience. Commander, did you really think a species that turned warfare into an art form would limit itself to conventional, faster-than-light travel? Humans have been developing classified propulsion systems for emergency scenarios. Military necessity has a way of accelerating technological advancement. The ship shuddered as its defensive systems came online, but Thompson remained utterly relaxed in his restraints. If anything, he seemed to be enjoying himself. I should probably mention, he added conversationally, the incoming ships aren't just carrying my teammates. They're carrying the entire Expeditionary Response Group SEALs, Rangers, Marines, Special Forces, and a few other units whose existence you'll learn about shortly. His smile grew wider. We call it overwhelming force. I believe you're about to receive a comprehensive education in human military doctrine. As alarms wailed throughout, the Sovereign's Wrath and its crew scrambled to prepare for a battle they had never imagined facing. Marcus Thompson closed his eyes and settled back into the interrogation chair. The hunt was about to begin, and for the first time in his long military career, he wasn't going to be the one doing the hunting. It was going to be interesting to watch his people work from the outside. The bridge of the Sovereign's Wrath had transformed from a symbol of Zephyrian supremacy into a nexus of barely controlled panic. Sensor displays showed formations of human vessels approaching at velocities that violated every known principle of interstellar physics, while the ship's defensive systems struggled to lock onto targets that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Captain Kraildex stood at the tactical station, his 4 hands dancing across controls that had never failed him in 12 years of military service. Now they felt inadequate, primitive, as if you were trying to fight starships with a child's toy. Status report, Commander Vextara demanded as she strode onto the bridge, her interrogation of the human prisoner temporarily abandoned in favor of the immediate crisis. 17 distinct vessels detected, Commander. Configuration unknown, propulsion system unknown, weapons capabilities unknown. Kraildex's voice carried the strain of an officer confronting the impossible. They're maintaining formation at precisely 2 light minutes distance, close enough to respond to any maneuver we make, far enough to avoid our longest-range weapons. Tactical assessment. They're studying us, Commander. Every time we adjust our defensive posture, they mirror the change within seconds. It's as if they know our capabilities better than we do. Vexthara felt cold certainty settle in her chest. Thompson's quantum transmission hadn't just provided intelligence. It had given the human fleet real-time tactical data about everything the Sovereign's Wrath was capable of. Incoming transmission, the communications officer announced. They're using our own communication protocols somehow. Put it through. The main view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that made every Zephyrian on the bridge take an involuntary step backward. The face looking back at them was human, but unlike Thompson's controlled calm, this one radiated barely contained violence. The man wore what appeared to be military insignia, though the design was unlike anything in their databases. This is Admiral Marcus Chun, Commander of Task Force Retribution. You are currently holding United States Navy personnel in violation of interstellar law. You have one opportunity to resolve this situation peacefully. Vexthara stepped forward, drawing on 3 decades of military bearing to project authority she no longer felt. I am Commander Vexthara of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. Your operative was captured conducting espionage against Empire assets. His detention is legitimate under established rules of warfare. Admiral Chun's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes, a subtle hardening that suggested Vexthara had just said precisely the wrong thing. Rules of warfare, he repeated quietly. Commander, I don't think you understand what you're dealing with. The individual you captured isn't just any Navy operative. Chief Thompson is one of 12 people on Earth authorized to carry the designation Reaper. That makes him family to every special operations soldier in the human military. The Admiral leaned forward slightly, and the image resolution was sharp enough that Vexthara could see the cold fury burning behind his professional facade. When you took him prisoner, you didn't just capture a soldier. You took someone's brother, someone's mentor, someone's friend. You made this personal for approximately 50,000 of the most dangerous individuals humanity has ever produced. Your threats don't impress us, Vexthara replied, though her voice lacked conviction. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered 17 star systems. We are not intimidated by primitive humans playing at warfare. Admiral Chun smiled, and the expression was more terrifying than any threat could have been. Primitive? You know, Commander, Chief Thompson mentioned you might say that. He also mentioned that your species apparently hasn't figured out the difference between conquest and warfare. The view screen split, showing tactical displays that made Vexthara's blood run cold. The 17 human ships had begun moving, not toward the Sovereign's Wrath but around it. creating a sphere of coverage that would prevent any escape. Conquest is what you do to weaker species that can't fight back. Admiral Chung continued conversationally. Warfare is what happens when you encounter someone who fights back more effectively than you expected. The ship's defensive system screamed warnings as they detected weapons locks from multiple directions. But the truly terrifying thing was what they couldn't detect. The human ships appeared to possess stealth capabilities that rendered them nearly invisible to Zephyrian sensors. Were being painted by targeting systems, Kraildix reported, his voice tight with stress. At least 40 distinct weapon signatures, but our sensors can't determine the nature of the weapons themselves. Admiral Chung's image remained steady on the view screen. Those are hunter-killer teams, Commander. Each ship carries approximately 30 special operations soldiers, equipped with technology your intelligence services haven't even dreamed of. They've been practicing boarding operations against captured alien vessels for the past 15 years. Impossible, Vexthara protested. Your species has only recently achieved interstellar travel. You couldn't have been preparing for extraterrestrial warfare for 15 years, Admiral Chun interrupted. Ever since we recovered wreckage from a Corvani scout ship that suffered mechanical failure in our outer system. Unlike your empire, humans don't assume we're alone in the galaxy. We prepare for possibilities. The implications of this revelation struck like physical blows. Humans hadn't stumbled into space travel. They had been preparing for interstellar warfare for over a decade. Every piece of alien technology they had encountered had been studied, reverse-engineered, and improved upon. The Corvani reported no contact with human forces, Vexthara said weakly. Of course not. Hard to file reports when you don't survive the encounter. Admiral Chun's tone remained conversational, but the words carried weight that seemed to press against the bridge's bulkheads. Humans have a saying, Commander. The best way to keep a secret is to make sure no one is left alive to tell it. In the detention center 3 levels below, Thompson continued his patient observation of the ship's panic responses. The quantum link had provided his people with detailed intelligence, but it also allowed him to monitor their approach in real time. Through the neural interface that Zalduin had so carelessly activated, he could sense the controlled fury of his teammates as they prepared for combat. SEAL Team 12 was aboard the lead assault craft, their faces hidden behind masks that had been inspired by the mythology of death itself. Army Rangers occupied the secondary vessels, their weapons loaded with ammunition specifically designed to penetrate alien armor. Marine Raiders filled the boarding pods, their assault equipment calibrated for non-human physiology. And leading them all was a figure that made Thompson smile despite his circumstances. Master Chief Sarah Valkyrie. Morrison had volunteered for the rescue operation before the mission briefing was even complete. Where Thompson had earned his nickname through precision and efficiency, Morrison had earned hers through the simple fact that enemy combatants who encountered her rarely lived long enough to describe the experience. You should know, Thompson called out to his guards, his voice carrying easily through the cell's audio system. My people are about to demonstrate why humans have never lost a soldier to alien capture. Guard Veltar spun toward the cell, his plasma rifle raised. Your rescue fleet will be destroyed by Imperial reinforcements. The Sovereign's wrath has already transmitted our position to command. Thompson's laughter was genuinely amused. Veltar, you really don't understand what's happening here, do you? Your transmission was intercepted and decoded before it left your ship. Human electronic warfare capabilities include real-time communication monitoring and quantum encryption breaking. The young guard's exoskeleton paled. That's impossible. Imperial communication systems use quantum entanglement across multiple dimensional frequencies. No primitive species could develop quantum manipulation technology within 15 years of first contact with alien artifacts. Thompson's smile was sharp. Guard, you're thinking like someone whose species developed naturally. Humans don't develop naturally. We weaponize everything, including captured alien technology. The ship shuddered as the first boarding pods made contact with the hull. Unlike the clumsy docking procedures the Zephyrians expected, Human boarding technology simply cut through armor plating like paper, creating perfectly sized access points sealed against atmospheric loss. "Contact," came the announcement over the ship's intercom. "Multiple breaches on decks 7, 12, and 19. All security teams respond immediately." Thompson closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of combat echoing through the ship's corridors. Plasma rifle fire, the distinctive crack of human kinetic weapons, and underneath it all, the controlled voices of his teammates as they executed a plan they had rehearsed hundreds of times. The human boarding teams moved through the Sovereign's wrath like death itself given form and purpose. They advanced in perfect coordination, their weapons firing with precision that turned Zephyrian defensive positions into charnel houses. But more than their firepower, it was their methodology that proved devastating. Every human soldier carried complete intelligence on the ship's layout, crew positions, and defensive capabilities. They knew which corridors to avoid, which bulkheads could be breached, which systems to target for maximum effect. The quantum transmission from Thompson's neural interface had provided them with the equivalent of architects' blueprints and enemy battle plans. Master Chief Morrison led the primary assault team toward the detention center with the relentless efficiency of someone who had performed similar operations on 3 different continents and 2 different planets. Behind her, SEAL Team 12 moved like shadows given substance, their weapons eliminating threats before their targets even realized they were under attack. "Reaper, this is Valkyrie," she transmitted through her quantum communicator. "We're inbound to your position. Citrop?" Thompson's voice came back steady and calm despite the chaos surrounding him. 3 friendly prisoners in detention cells Alpha, Beta, and Charlie. Interrogation team of 4 in the enhanced questioning chamber. Guards are jumpy but contained. "Copy that." "Ada 2 minutes. How's your health?" "Better than my hosts, I expect." Morrison's smile was invisible behind her tactical mask, but her team recognized the tone. Their mentor and friend was unbroken, unbowed, and probably planning something unpleasant for his captors. On the bridge, chaos reigned supreme. Damage reports flooded in from across the ship as human boarding teams systematically dismantled centuries of Zephyrian military doctrine. The invaders moved with a precision that spoke of extensive training against specifically this type of target. "They know our ship better than we do," Kraildix reported in disbelief. "Every defensive position we establish, they circumvent. Every tactical advantage we try to employ, they neutralize before we can implement it." Admiral Chun's image on the view screen watched the destruction with clinical interest. "Surprised, Commander? Your prisoner provided us with detailed intelligence on your vessel's capabilities. But more than that, he provided psychological profiles on your crew." Vexthara felt her command crumbling around her. "What do you want?" "The immediate release of all human prisoners. Full compensation for damages resulting from their illegal detention. And a formal apology for violations of interstellar law." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Chun's expression didn't change. "Then my people will continue their current operations until your ship is completely pacified. After which we'll discuss the terms under less favorable circumstances for your crew." The sounds of combat were drawing closer to the bridge. Zephyrian security forces were being systematically overwhelmed by human soldiers, who fought with a combination of advanced technology and primitive savagery that defied conventional tactical analysis. "Commander!" The communications officer's voice cracked with stress. "The boarding teams have reached Deck 5? They're moving toward the detention center and they're not taking prisoners." Vexthara closed her eyes. In 3,000 years of conquest, the Zephyrian Empire had never encountered anything like this. Their enemies had always followed predictable pattern surrender when overwhelmed, negotiate when cornered, accept defeat with dignity when facing superior force. Humans apparently did none of those things. "All units, stand down," she ordered quietly. "Prepare to receive surrender terms." But even as she gave the order, Vexthara knew that the strategic situation had changed forever. Humans weren't just another species to be conquered or ignored. They were something new, something dangerous, something that had taken the tools of warfare and elevated them to an art form. In the detention center, the sound of approaching footsteps brought smiles to Thompson's face. Heavy, measured, purposeful steps that he recognized from 1,000 missions on a dozen different worlds. The detention center doors exploded inward, revealing figures in black tactical gear that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved with fluid precision, weapons sweeping the room for threats before focusing on the guards, who wisely dropped their plasma rifles and raised their hands in surrender. Master Chief Morrison approached Thompson's cell, her tactical mask retracting to reveal features that had been carved from stone by years of combat. "Hey, Marcus. Looks like you've been having fun." Thompson grinned as the cell's locking mechanism was overridden by human electronic warfare equipment. "Sarah, right on time as always. How was the trip?" "Educational." Morrison's expression was grim satisfaction personified. "These aliens have some interesting technology. Our engineers are going to have a field day with it." As the restraints released him, Thompson stood and stretched muscles that had been immobilized for too long. Around him, his teammates worked with practiced efficiency to secure the area and extract the civilian prisoners. "Status?" he asked. "Ship secured, crew surrendered. Admiral Chun is negotiating terms." "The usual." Morrison handed him a sidearm and tactical gear. "Ready to go home?" Thompson looked around the alien vessel that had been his prison for the past day, noting the technological marvels that would soon be studied in human laboratories. He thought about the intelligence he had gathered, the quantum transmissions that had provided his people with unprecedented insights into alien technology and psychology. "Almost," he said quietly. "There's one thing I need to do first." He approached Guard Veltar, who stood trembling against the wall with his hands raised. The young Zephyrian's exoskeleton had gone pale with terror, and his eyes showed the shell shock of someone whose entire worldview had just been shattered. "Veltar," Thompson said gently, his voice carrying none of the violence that had marked the last few hours. "I want you to remember this moment. Remember what happened when your people captured a human soldier? Remember how quickly your superiority became irrelevant?" The guard nodded frantically, unable to speak. "Good," Thompson smiled, and for the first time since his capture, the expression held genuine warmth. "Because you're going to live through this. You're going to go back to your home world, and you're going to tell everyone you meet about what you witnessed here today." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than any shout could have conveyed. "You're going to tell them that humans are no longer content to explore the galaxy peacefully. You're going to tell them that we've moved beyond defense to active threat assessment. You're going to tell them that the next time any alien species considers taking human prisoners, they should remember the name Reaper and ask themselves if they're prepared for the consequences." Thompson stepped back, his mission finally complete. "And most importantly, you're going to tell them that humans keep their promises. When we say no one fights alone, we mean it." As human extraction teams escorted him from the detention center, Thompson allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. His capture had provided humanity with invaluable intelligence on alien technology and psychology. The rescue operation had demonstrated human military capabilities to any species monitoring the encounter. But more than that, it had established a principle that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. Humans protected their own. No matter the cost, no matter the odds, no matter how many star systems stood in their way. In the aftermath, as human ships escorted the damaged Sovereign's Wrath to a neutral port for repairs, the story began to spread through the galactic communication networks. Not the official reports which spoke of diplomatic incidents and treaty negotiations, but the whispered accounts from survivors who had witnessed something unprecedented. They spoke of human soldiers who moved like death itself, who fought with technology that shouldn't exist, who turned warfare into an art form that defied every accepted military doctrine. They spoke of a species that had hidden its true capabilities while preparing for the inevitable moment, when the galaxy would learn what humans were truly capable of. And they spoke of a name that would become legend among the stars, Reaper, the human who had turned his own capture into the opening move of humanity's emergence as a galactic power. The Empire had awakened something in the depths of space, something that had been patient and careful and thorough in its preparations. Now that something was no longer content to hide in the shadows. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.